Hey there guys, sorry about that. I had to use a couple of different image capturing tools and sound recording tools to do this because it's PowerPoint. Um, Today I'm going to do a quick overview of basically what to look out for when you're making a new desktop PC, new gaming PC in particular, but I'll talk about the different, what hardware is best for what really. I decided to do this simply because I saw a couple and they were dreadful, and I thought, you know what, I actually know quite a bit about the modern hardware at the minute, and I'll do a quick tutorial video to go over it. Um, this tutorial video is going out, I think it's on the 7th of April, yeah, 7th of April 2013. I only say that because hardware does go, like new hardware comes out fairly regularly. I think AMD 8000 series will be with us within sort of 6 months. So there's only so long this is going to be in date, but I thought I'd do one for now because I haven't found one that's properly in date. The first thing I wanted to go over was the basically what process you want to get. So currently there are two big competitors, Intel and AMD. They're the only competitors, actually, to be honest, in the desktop market. And there's fanboys for both that you kind of have to be careful of, because if you ask questions, a lot of the time someone will be like, "Oh, go Intel, it's always better," or "Oh, go AMD, it's always cheaper and just as good." And neither of these are really true. It depends what you need to be doing, really. Um, Unfortunately, AMD does seem to be the worst of the two at the minute, and I'll explain why that is in a minute. Basically, the two newest architectures for each are PileDrive and Ivy Bridge, and what an architecture is just the series of processor, basically. So Ivy Bridge, you'll probably see it as the Intel 3000 series, so you've got the i3 3000 series, i5 3000 series, and i7 3000 series. And then you've also got the Pentium G2000 series that is Ivy Bridge as well. And then all of these fit in socket 1155 motherboards, I think it is. And then you've got PileDriver that is like there's PileDriver and there's Bulldozer, the FX series. PileDriver is the most recent, and it's things like the FX 8350 are the PileDrive ones. So what does this mean? Well, they're two very different architectures. About, I don't know when the i3s and stuff were originally released, but basically, for those of you that remember a long time ago, these AMD used to have Phenom 2 processors that were great. But then they came out with this new architecture called PileDriver, and the idea was simple. You have two cores with shared resources, and the shared resources are the fetch and decoder. Now, the fetch and decoder are what takes the instructions and then gives the instructions to the cores to process. And the idea was simple. Because they only had one of these for every two cores, you could fit more cores on a piece of silicon. That's what processors are made of, obviously. And this worked. This is why we have an affordable 8-core processor. Unfortunately, what also happened is clock speeds increased. So the original idea was that the fetch and decoder would give an instruction to one core, and while one core was churning away on that sort of bit of information, the fetch and decoder could then give information to the other core. So this was like a really good idea, but then suddenly they're releasing a 4 GHz quad-core, 8-core processor, sorry. And what that means is, before the fetch and decoder can then give a instruction to the next core, the first core's already churned through the information that's been given, and so what happens is you get half the cores idling all the time. That means you've basically got an 8-core that's a quad-core, unless you're doing video editing, because video editing, you just hand the core some information and the core just churns away at its max speed. So it's unfortunate, but it's happened. They're not necessarily bad processors because they're priced accordingly, but yeah. And for Intel, they've got the i3, i5, and i7, and the i3 and i7 both have hyperthreading. That basically means they can carry out two tasks at once. Every other task that goes into the processor is of a different process, up to a max of 2 processors per core. And this works better because of the increase in clock speed as well. That's not to say that AMD are bad, but the reason to really go Intel at the minute is because the upgrade pathway is much better. The i5 3570K is currently the best gaming processor to get, and then you can go up to the i7 3770K, that AMD has no rival for, and it just means you've got a longer lifespan of your current motherboard because you can upgrade to that i7 if you ever need to. AMD, to get similar performance to the i5 3570K, you're going to be going probably for the FX 8000 series straight away, and then you don't have much upgradability. Personally, and then again at the bottom end of Intel, you've got competitors for AMD. So the AMD FX 4100, no 4100. Sorry, I was right the first time. And the FX 6100 probably performs similarly in games to the i3 3220. So this is the lower end and the cheaper. The cheapest, the sort of, I'm going to go through the stuff you need for an entry-level gaming PC that you can enjoy games on medium to high settings on, just to show people that you don't need to spend ridiculous amounts of money. So the processor I would recommend, absolute minimum, is the Pentium G2020. It's 2.9 GHz dual core. I find it hard to recommend it because I don't know how long it will last, simply because new consoles coming out in 6 months, and I don't know if they're really going to go up to, they're really going to be pushing quad cores. So I would go for the i3 3220 if you can afford it, simply because it's seen as a quad core by the computer, so it should last. That's not to say don't go for the Pentium, like if you really can't afford it, because it's in the socket 1155 motherboard that can take the i3. Okay, next is graphics cards, and this is the big thing that people don't realise. A lot of companies like put good processors in, put lots of big hard drives in, put loads of RAM, and people don't really know what the graphics card is and think, oh yeah, it's an amazing computer, and then they get the computer and it's not that amazing really, because they bought a big i7 with 16 gigs of RAM, but it's got like an NVIDIA 620 in it or something like that, or a AMD 7480, I think is an OEM card. And this is the heart of a gaming PC. You don't really need that good a processor. You can get a good sort of graphics card, and that's just what I'm going to go through now. So really the minimum is the NVIDIA has just released the GT 650 Ti with Boost, and it was originally the best entry level card was to get was either the AMD 7, no it was the AMD 7770. The 650 Ti with Boost is, I'd have to say, slightly better. I would go for that over the 7770, but it's really a matter of choice which one you prefer. Going for exactly what the graphics cards, all the series are, is a bit difficult. Basically you want the most recent series, not necessarily because it always performs better than the older series, because it has newer technologies. I'm still running NVIDIA 560, that's last series technology, and it can still run games well. But if you're buying a new graphics card, you want the most recent, because the companies know that their old series graphics cards can still run games at max settings. So they always add a new technology or something that allows you to have a slightly better experience. So from NVIDIA we saw TXAA, that's a new type of anti-aliasing that basically makes games look nicer. And the HD 7000 series came with something that I can't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, they came with something. Something I did really quickly want to clear up is a lot of NVIDIA fanboys still talk about physics, and that's PHYSX physics, the physics engine built by NVIDIA, that AMD doesn't have, and just don't listen to them. Physics doesn't apply anymore. It was made like 7 years ago, and the idea was NVIDIA would pay companies to use their physics engine to make the games run really well on their graphics cards, but it happened with Batman Arkham Asylum and Arkham City, and that's it. And even if you don't have an NVIDIA card, you can still play it because the physics is just done on the processor. It doesn't make any difference. Don't buy an NVIDIA card for that technology, basically. And just going through the current level graphics cards again, if you can afford to go up from the 7770 or the 650 Ti with Boost, you want the 7870. That's the next best card in that price bracket to get. Then if you go up the price a bit more, it's the NVIDIA 670 is the best card to get. And then if you go right for the top end, you're looking at the 7970 GHz edition. Is the best top end single GPU graphics card to get. Going up from that again are the dual GPU solutions. These are having 2 graphics cores on one graphics card. The Ares 2, made by Zeus, is probably the best dual GPU graphics card on the market at the minute. And this is Nvidia Titan that I wouldn't really even go into because it's 800 quid and no one has that kind of money. Although the 7990 Ares edition is similar. Be careful with more than one graphics card. I say that because there's something called micro stuttering. YouTube it if you're really interested in what it is, but it's an issue with more than one GPU, so just be careful. And Antec. Now, I post this because all graphics cards and processors, you can't really look at just the cores and the frequency because the architectures are so different. And Antec is a great site because it has this bench, and I'll post this in the description. And it has this bench bit that basically benches all modern CPUs and GPUs, and you can look at the real world performance of each of these, so you can make more educated decisions on when you're building your computer. RAM, just go through what kind of RAM you should have. You should always have 2 sticks of RAM because they're running dual channel. That means half the data is simultaneously written to one stick of RAM, and the other stick of RAM that speeds RAM up a lot. If you're buying a new computer now, you should be getting 8 gigs of RAM. That's 2 times 4 gigs in a gaming PC. If you're looking for a PC that you're going to edit high HD video on, if it's sort of short videos for YouTube, you want 16 gigs, ideally in 4 times 4 gigs. If you're going for full-length HD video, you want 32 gigs. 4 gig sticks are the best at the minute because as soon as you got to 8 gig sticks, you've got the same number of pins connected to the motherboard, but you've got more RAM on here, so the latency goes up. And you just want to be aware of that. So 133 megahertz, 133 megahertz DDR3 4 gig sticks is the best move. Power supply. I wanted to go over this because a lot of people don't understand sort of what power supply they need. You can get power supplies out there for 20 quid, or you can get power supplies out there for the same wattage for like 100 quid. And quite rightly, people ask why. Basically, power supplies don't output what they say they do. So I've got this here just an example. You never need a 1200 watt power supply unless you're running a server. So if, for example, I go to the 500 watt power supply, that does not output 500 watts. That is the power that it turns from the wall socket into energy. Energy is dissipated through heat and sound. So your computer does not get all that 500 watts. Fortunately, there's an 80 plus system that was introduced that tells you if a power supply, what amount of power is getting to your computer. If a power supply doesn't have an 80 plus certification, do not buy it. I can't stress this enough. That means that less than 80% of the stated power is actually reaching your motherboard. So if you've got a 500 watt power supply, it's actually giving your motherboard less than 400 watts. And if they haven't bothered to go for the 80 plus certification, it's likely that it's probably around 70% or even 65%. The components are that bad. So you really want this 80 plus certification. Most good brands like OCZ, XFX or Corsair always have this 80 plus certification, and normally 80 plus bronze. It means that max power output, you're getting 85% of the power to your PC. So for a gaming rig, I probably suggest, for an entry level gaming rig, Corsair 500 watt builder series. I've just upgraded my power supply to an XFX Pro series 650 watt, and it's really good. I can recommend that as well if you want to go for a slightly higher end graphics card. Go on to AMD or Nvidia to look at the recommended graphics card sort of requirements, and that'll tell you what power supply you need. But bear in mind that power supply that they're recommending is the amount of power that your computer's getting. So if it recommends a 400 watt power supply, you want a 500 watt 80 plus one. So you need to give yourself that breathing room. And yeah, that's that. Case, I mentioned this for 2 reasons. People forget the case is a primary cooler. This controls how quickly room temperature air gets to your components, and hot air created by your components gets expelled from the case. Also, becoming a bigger and bigger issue is the size of graphics cards that have to be able to fit in the case. So you want to be spending a reasonable amount on this and just making sure that there's room. You can normally look up, nowadays with this increasing graphics card length, either on review videos done by the company themselves or on the manufacturer websites. They'll tell you the size of GPU they can take in millimeters, and then you compare that to the size of the GPU on the manufacturer's site for the GPU. That will have all the dimensions on there. This is a Corsair Vengeance C70. This is the case I just got, and it's brilliant. A lot of the good ones come with cable management. That's well worth getting. And I think that's it, guys. Thanks for listening.